In a galaxy far, far away, where twin suns set over desert planets and frozen worlds glittered with eternal ice, where hyperspace lanes connected billions of souls across unfathomable distances, there existed a tradition older than the Empire itself, a tradition that predated the clone wars that survived the fall of the Republic and that continued in secret even under Imperial rule, whispered about in homes from the core to the outer rim. This was the tradition of Life Day, a celebration of family, hope, and the interconnected nature of all living things. And at the heart of this tradition was a delivery operation so vast, so impossibly complex, that only one family in the entire galaxy could possibly coordinate it. The tradition itself had roots stretching back into the mists of galactic history, to a time before the Republic was even a dream in the minds of idealistic senators. Life Day had begun on Kashyyyk, the Wookiee homeworld, as a celebration of the fundamental interconnectedness of all living beings. The Wookiees believed that life itself was precious, that every creature from the smallest microbe to the largest tree was part of a greater whole, a cosmic family bound together by invisible threads of existence and purpose. The celebration originally involved elaborate ceremonies, sacred rituals performed in the Roshar trees that formed the very foundation of Wookiee civilization. As the Republic expanded and species began to mingle across the stars, Life Day transformed from a Wookiee tradition into something more universal. Different cultures added their own customs, their own meanings, their own ways of celebrating the fundamental truth that life was interconnected and precious. Some focused on family gatherings. Others emphasized charity and giving to those less fortunate. Still others used the day for reflection, for meditation on their place in the grand tapestry of existence. But across all these variations, one element became nearly universal: the giving of gifts, particularly to children. The reasoning was simple, yet profound. Children represented the future, the continuation of life itself. By giving them tokens of appreciation and love, by showing them that they were valued and remembered, communities reinforced the idea that every life mattered, that no one was forgotten in the vast cosmos. It was a way of saying, you are seen, you are cherished, you are part of this family we call the galaxy. The Organa family of Alderaan had been the keepers of Life Day for 17 generations. Not the public celebrations, mind you. Those happened everywhere, in homes and communities, across 1,000 systems. No, the Organas handled something far more specific and far more magical. They delivered gifts to every child in the galaxy in a single night. Impossible, you might think, and you'd be right to think it. But the Organas had turned impossibility into clockwork precision over centuries of refinement. They had technology that made the Empire's war machine look primitive by comparison. They had intelligence networks that put Bothan spies to shame. And they had commitment, the kind of absolute dedication that only comes from knowing that millions of children were counting on you, even if they didn't know your name. High above Alderaan, hidden behind a sophisticated cloaking shield that made it invisible to sensors, floated the Life Day Operations Station. It was a massive orbital platform larger than many cities, filled with warehouses, production facilities, packaging centers, and the most advanced logistics computers ever created. The station operated year-round with thousands of workers coordinating gift production analyzing data on children across the galaxy and planning delivery routes with mathematical precision that would make an Imperial navigator weep with envy. At the center of this operation was Bail Organa. Not the famous Bail Organa who served in the Imperial Senate and would one day help found the rebellion. That was Bail Organa the Younger, or Bail Jr., as the family called him. No, the Bail Organa who ran Life Day operations was Bail Organa Sr., a man in his 70s with silver hair, laugh lines around his eyes, and the kind of warm presence that made everyone around him feel like family. Bail Sr. had been running the Life Day delivery for nearly 40 years. He'd taken over from his father, who had taken over from his father, stretching back through generations of Organas who had all shared the same mission: bring joy to children across the galaxy, one gift at a time. Under his leadership, the operation had reached heights of efficiency and scale that previous generations could only dream of. They now delivered to nearly 3 billion children across Republic space and even into some Imperial territories where the traditions still quietly persisted. The night of Life Day delivery was the culmination of an entire year's worth of work. Every department, every worker, every droid and computer system all focused on a single objective: complete delivery before the suns rose on the following day. It was coordinated chaos on a galactic scale, and Bail Sr. orchestrated it all from the command center, a massive circular room filled with holographic displays, communication stations, and real-time tracking systems that monitored every delivery speeder in the fleet. Bail Jr., by contrast, was a man who had never quite felt comfortable with the family business. He was technically skilled, certainly. He could read the logistic data and understand the routing algorithms. He'd spent his whole life training to take over from his father eventually, but his heart had never been in it the way Bail Sr.'s was. Bail Jr. preferred the political world, the speeches, the diplomacy, the chance to make change through legislation and negotiation rather than through toy deliveries. He helped during Life Day, of course. Family duty demanded that, but he counted down the hours until he could return to his work in the Senate. Then there was Leia, young Princess Leia Organa, only 8 years old, but already showing the fierce intelligence and determination that would one day make her a leader of the rebellion. Leia loved Life Day with the kind of pure enthusiasm that only children possess. She'd grown up surrounded by the operation, playing in the warehouses as a toddler, asking endless questions about how the deliveries worked, memorizing the names of the delivery crews, and dreaming of the day she might be old enough to help with an actual delivery run. She saw magic in what her grandfather did, not the mystical forest kind of magic, though the Organas suspected that some force sensitivity might have helped their ancestors establish the tradition in the first place. No, Leia saw the magic of bringing joy to children who needed it, of making sure that no child woke up on Life Day morning feeling forgotten. She understood, in the way that children often understand the important things better than adults, that the operation wasn't really about the gifts. It was about telling children that they mattered, that someone cared enough to remember them, that they weren't alone in a vast galaxy. The command center also housed the operation's greatest asset and greatest annoyance, depending on who you asked. GRF-0, or Granfo, as everyone called him, was a protocol droid who had been with the Organa family for longer than anyone could remember. He claimed to have been present for over 200 Life Day deliveries, though his memory banks were so old and fragmented that nobody could verify the exact number. What was certain was that Granfo knew more about Life Day operations than any organic being alive. Granfo stood nearly 2 meters tall, his bronze-colored plating polished to a shine that reflected the holographic displays around him. He had an irritating habit of correcting people, an encyclopedic knowledge of every delivery gone wrong in the operation's history, and an absolutely unshakable belief that the old ways were better than any newfangled modern approach. Bale Jr. found him insufferable. Bale Sr. found him invaluable. Leia found him hilarious, especially when he got into arguments with the modern droids about proper protocol. The modern droids in question were represented primarily by C-3PO, a fussy protocol droid assigned to the operation just 5 years earlier, and R2-D2, an astromech who served as the backup systems manager. C-3PO and Granfo had established an immediate rivalry, each convinced that the other represented everything wrong with their respective generations of droid design. Their arguments provided endless entertainment during the long hours of preparation leading up to Life Day night. The delivery fleet itself was a marvel of engineering that combined cutting-edge technology with centuries-old tradition. The primary delivery vehicle was a modified Corellian freighter called the Aurora's Gift, named after the first organa to establish the Life Day tradition. The ship had been upgraded and modified so many times over the generations that almost none of its original components remained, but tradition held that it was still the same ship, the same way a person remained the same person even as their cells regenerated over years. The Aurora's Gift was equipped with a hyperdrive system that made 0.75 past light speed look sluggish by comparison. It needed that speed. To deliver to billions of children across the galaxy in a single night required jumping in and out of hyperspace thousands of times, spending mere minutes in real space at each location before jumping again. The ship also had stealth technology that made it invisible to most sensors, allowing it to slip past Imperial patrols and planetary defense systems without raising alarms. But the ship alone couldn't complete the operation. That's where the speeder fleet came in. Attached to the Aurora's Gift were hundreds of small delivery speeders, each piloted by a member of the delivery crew. These speeders would deploy from the main ship once it reached a system, fanning out to different planets and moons to complete their assigned deliveries while the Aurora's Gift moved on to the next system. The speeders would then rendezvous with the ship at designated coordinates, reload, and deploy again. It was a dance of logistics and timing that left no room for error. The delivery crews themselves were a mix of species from across the galaxy. Humans, Bothans, Twi'leks, even a few Wookiees whose strength made them invaluable for handling the heavier packages. They were all volunteers, people who believed in the mission enough to dedicate one night a year to bringing joy to children they'd never meet. Many of them had been children who received Life Day gifts themselves once, and now they wanted to give back. Others simply believed that the galaxy needed more kindness, more moments of pure happiness, especially in these dark times under Imperial rule. Bale Sr. knew every crew member by name. He remembered their families, their stories, their favorite foods in the station's cafeteria. He made sure that the operation felt like a family not just a business. That personal touch, that genuine care for the people doing the work, was part of what made the operation run so smoothly. People didn't just work for Bale Sr., they worked with him as part of something larger than themselves. The warehouse levels of the station were something out of a fever dream. Endless corridors filled with packages sorted by sector, system, planet, region, city, and individual child. The sorting algorithms were sophisticated enough to account for time zones, ensuring that gifts arrived when children were asleep, but not so early that the chance of discovery was too high. They factored in planetary rotation speeds, local customs about gift giving, even whether a particular family had pets that might disturb packages left in certain locations. Every gift was personalized based on data collected throughout the year. The Organas had information networks on thousands of worlds, trusted contacts who reported back on children's interests, wishes, and needs. They had to be careful, of course. Under the Empire, too many questions could attract unwanted attention. But over the generations, the family had perfected the art of gathering information quietly, of understanding what would bring joy to a child without raising suspicion about why they were asking. Some gifts were toys, of course, model starfighters, dolls representing heroes from local folklore, puzzles, and games. But many gifts were practical things that children needed: warm clothing for kids on frozen worlds, books for children who loved to read but had no access to libraries, medical supplies for families struggling to afford treatment. The Organas understood that sometimes the best gift wasn't the most exciting one. Sometimes it was the thing that told a child that someone, somewhere, understood their struggles and wanted to help. The night of Life Day delivery in the year 2. BBY began like every other Life Day for the past 40 years. Bale Sr. stood in a command center surrounded by holographic displays showing the entire galaxy divided into color-coded delivery zones. Each zone represented approximately 300 million children, grouped by proximity and optimized routing. The displays showed real-time status updates: packages loaded, crews ready, speeders fueled, coordinates locked in. Leia stood beside her grandfather, practically vibrating with excitement. She wore a miniature version of the delivery crew uniform, red and white, with the Organa crest on the shoulder. Bale Sr. had given it to her as a Life Day gift the previous year, and she'd immediately declared that she would wear it every Life Day until she was old enough to join a real delivery crew. Tonight, she would be staying in the command center, watching the operation unfold on the displays. But she was determined to be part of it, in whatever way she could. Bale Jr. stood at his station, reviewing the final logistics reports with the kind of dutiful attention that came from obligation rather than passion. He'd already calculated that if everything went smoothly, he could be back in his quarters and reviewing Senate briefings by dawn. He had an important committee meeting in 3 days, and he wanted to be prepared. The Life Day operation was important, certainly, but the galaxy didn't stop turning because of a single night's tradition. C-3PO fussed around the command center, checking and rechecking systems that had already been checked a dozen times. Oh my, I do hope the transponder array in Sector 7 is functioning properly this year. Last year's momentary failure nearly caused a collision with an Imperial convoy, and I don't think my circuits could handle that level of stress again. R2, Have you verified the backup navigation protocols? R2-D2 beeped an affirmative response that somehow managed to sound annoyed, even through droid binary. Granfo, overhearing the exchange, let out a metallic harumph. In my day, we didn't need backup navigation protocols. We knew the routes by heart. These modern droids, and their reliance on computer systems, what happens when the computers fail, I ask you? That's precisely why we have backup systems, you obsolete collection of spare parts, C-3PO retorted. Unlike your generation, we plan for contingencies rather than simply hoping for the best and blundering through. Obsolete? Why, you presumptuous little... Granfo's response was cut off by Bale Sr.'s gentle but firm intervention. Gentlemen, please. We have a galaxy of children waiting. Save your philosophical debates for after the deliveries are complete. His voice carried the kind of authority that came from years of managed not just operations, but personalities, knowing exactly when to be firm and when to be warm. The old man turned to the main holographic display and raised his voice to address the entire command center. All right, everyone, this is our night. 17 billion packages, 712 delivery crews, one night to bring joy to every corner of the galaxy. Some of you have been doing this for decades. Some of you are new this year, but we all share the same purpose, to remind children that they are seen, they are valued, and they are loved. Let's make this the best Life Day delivery in our family's history. A cheer went up from the assembled workers and crew members. Leia clapped her hands together, her eyes shining with excitement. Even Bale Jr. couldn't help but smile slightly at his father's speech. The old man had a gift for inspiring people, no doubt about it. Bale Sr. reached out and activated the master control sequence. Across the station, lights shifted from standby yellow to operational green. Begin delivery sequence. Aurora's gift, you are cleared for departure. Far below in the main hangar bay, the Aurora's gift came to life. Its engines hummed with power, a sound that had been compared to singing by romantic souls and to a poorly tuned orchestra by more practical individuals. The ship was enormous, easily 200 meters long, its hull adorned with traditional Life Day decorations that had been painted and repainted for generations. Attached to its sides and underbelly were the deployment pods containing the delivery speeders, ready to launch at a moment's notice. Captain Merrick commanded the Aurora's gift, a grizzled veteran of both the Clone Wars and the early years of the Empire, before he'd retired to take on what he called a more meaningful mission. He sat in the captain's chair on the bridge, surrounded by his flight crew, all of them wearing the traditional red and white of the Life Day operation. All systems green, Command. We are ready to jump on your mark. Merrick's voice was calm, professional, the voice of someone who had done this many times before and trusted his ship and crew completely. You have your mark, Captain. Bring them joy. Bale Sr.'s voice came through the comm system warm and clear. The Aurora's gift lifted gracefully from the hangar bay, passing through the atmospheric shield into the vacuum of space. For just a moment, it hung there above Alderaan, silhouetted against the peaceful blue and green world below. Then the hyperdrive engaged, and the ship stretched into starlines, vanishing into hyperspace. The delivery had begun. In the command center, holographic displays immediately came alive with data streams. The first zone was Sector Alpha 1, encompassing the core worlds nearest to Alderaan. The Aurora's gift would spend approximately 7 minutes in that sector, deploying speeders to dozens of worlds before jumping to the next zone. Each minute was accounted for, each second optimized for maximum efficiency. Leia watched the displays with rapt attention, tracking individual delivery crews as they fanned out from the Aurora's gift. She'd memorized the names of many of the pilots over the years, and she called out their progress like a sports announcer. Grandmother Kessel just cleared Coruscant's defense grid. Lieutenant Varn is approaching Corellia. Oh, Captain Syndulla is already finished with her first deliveries on Chandrila and heading back to the ship. Bail Sr. smiled at his granddaughter's enthusiasm. This was what the operation was really about, he thought. Not the logistics, not the technology, not even the gifts themselves. It was about this feeling, this sense of wonder and connection, of being part of something good in a galaxy that often seemed dark and cruel. If he could keep that feeling alive in Leia, if she could carry it forward to the next generation, then everything they did here mattered. The first hour of deliveries proceeded with clockwork precision. Zone after zone turned green on the displays as crews completed their assigned deliveries and rendezvoused with the Aurora's gift. The ship jumped from sector to sector with perfect timing, never spending more than a few minutes in any one location, always staying ahead of the schedule, always maintaining the rhythm that would let them complete the impossible task before dawn broke across the galaxy. But the night was long, and even the most perfect machine has moments of strain. Around the 3-hour mark, as they were working through the mid-rim territories, the first complications emerged. An Imperial Star Destroyer appeared unexpectedly in Sector Delta 4, forcing the Aurora's gift to abort its scheduled jump and reroute through a longer path. The delay was only 4 minutes, but in an operation this tightly scheduled, 4 minutes was an eternity. Other zones had to be compressed, speeders had to push their engines harder, and stress levels in the command center notched upward. Then, in Sector Gamma 7, one of the delivery speeders suffered a repulsor malfunction. The pilot, a Bothan named Kothlis, managed to complete his deliveries using only backup systems, but the incident cost valuable time and meant the speeder had to be swapped out at the next rendezvous point. More adjustments to the schedule, more pressure on the crews. Bail Jr. monitored these complications with increasing tension. Every delay, every adjustment, every deviation from the perfect plan made him anxious. He kept running calculations in his head, trying to determine if they would still finish on time or if they were sliding toward failure. His father seemed calm, but Bail Jr. knew that calmness was deceptive. The old man was making hundreds of micro-decisions every minute, adjusting and adapting on the fly, keeping the entire operation balanced like a spinner on a string. "We're falling behind schedule in the outer rim sectors," Bail Jr. said, unable to keep the concern from his voice. "At this rate, we'll be late to the Tingle Arm territories by at least 15 minutes. "Then we'll make it up in the corporate sector," Bail Sr. replied without hesitation. "The corporate sector is mostly automated manufacturing worlds with fewer children. We can shave 10 minutes from those deliveries and bank the time for later zones where we need it more." But the schedule is a guide, not a law. Life Day isn't about perfect timing. It's about making sure every child gets their gift. We adapt, We adjust and we deliver. That's what we do. The old man's voice was gentle but firm, the voice of someone who had navigated thousands of complications over decades of life days. Leia tugged on her grandfather's sleeve. "Grandpa, can I help? Is there anything I can do?" Bale Sr. looked down at his granddaughter and smiled. "You're already helping, little one. You're reminding us why we do this. Keep tracking those crews and calling out their successes. Every time you celebrate someone's achievement, you're giving them energy to keep going." And so Leia did, her young voice ringing through the command center with updates and encouragement. Commander Sato just completed deliveries to all 7 moons of Ryloth. Squadron Leader Organa just cleared the Kashyyyk system in record time. The crews could hear her through the comm channels, and more than one pilot smiled at the princess's enthusiasm, finding a second wind in their exhaustion. As the night wore on, the operation fell into a rhythm born of desperation and determination. Problems emerged constantly: sensor anomalies, unexpected Imperial patrols, mechanical failures, routing errors. But each time, the crew adapted. Bale Sr. made decisions with a kind of calm certainty that came from absolute trust in his people. Bale Jr. calculated and recalculated, his analytical mind finding solutions in the numbers even as his heart struggled to find the joy in it. The delivery crews pushed themselves to their limits and then beyond, driven by the knowledge that children were counting on them. C-3PO and Granfo even managed to set aside their differences, working together to coordinate the complex ballet of speeder deployments and recoveries. R2-D2 kept all the backup systems running smoothly, his astromech skills invaluable when primary systems showed signs of strain. The entire operation was a testament to what could be accomplished when people and droids worked together toward a common purpose. By hour 7, they had completed deliveries to over 70% of the target zones. The core worlds were finished. The mid-rim was mostly green. The outer rim was in progress, with crews pushing hard to make up for earlier delays. The operation was succeeding. Against all odds, despite every complication, they were going to make it. Leia had grown quiet as exhaustion began to set in, but she refused to leave the command center. She sat in a chair beside her grandfather's station, her eyes still glued to the displays, watching the steady progression of green zones spreading across the galactic map like hope itself, pushing back the darkness one delivery at a time. Bale Sr. noticed his granddaughter's tiredness and put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You should get some rest, little one. There's still several hours to go." "I want to see it through," Leia said, her voice small but determined. "I want to see every zone turn green. I want to know that every child got their gift." The old man felt his heart swell with pride and something deeper, a recognition that his granddaughter understood the mission in a way his own son never quite had. "All right," he said softly. "We'll see it through together." And they did, grandfather and granddaughter standing watch over an operation that defied possibility, that challenged the very notion of what could be accomplished in a single night. Around them, the command center hummed with focused activity. Ahead of them, across the galaxy, children slept peacefully, unaware that in just a few hours they would wake to discover that someone had remembered them, that they mattered enough to be included in this ancient tradition. The Aurora's gift jumped and jumped again, deploying speeders, recovering crews, maintaining its relentless pace across the stars. Captain Merrick and his bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, their movements almost choreographed after so many years of life days together. The ship was more than metal and circuits to them. It was the physical embodiment of hope, a flying reminder that good things still existed in a galaxy increasingly dominated by fear and oppression. As Hour 9 approached and the operation entered its final phase, a sense of cautious optimism began to permeate the command center. They were going to make it. Despite every obstacle, every complication, every moment of doubt, they were going to complete the delivery. Every child would wake to find their gift. The tradition would continue for another year. Bale Jr. checked the final calculations and allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. The numbers worked. The schedule held. The mission was succeeding. Perhaps there was something to his father's way of doing things after all. This blend of careful planning and adaptive improvisation, of trusting people to rise to challenges rather than trying to eliminate every variable through pure control. In the warehouse levels, the last packages were loaded onto speeders. In the hangar bays, mechanics performed final checks on equipment that had been pushed to its absolute limits. Across the station, workers who had been awake for over 24 hours found energy reserves they didn't know they possessed, driven by the knowledge that they were almost there, that the finish line was in sight. The holographic display showed a galaxy almost entirely green now, just a few scattered zones remaining in the deepest reaches of the outer rim and the unknown regions. These were the hardest deliveries, the most remote locations, the places where children live so far from civilization that they might go years without seeing anyone outside their own families. But the Organas had never forgotten them. No child was too remote, too isolated, too insignificant to receive a gift on Life Day. Bale Sr. watched the displays with satisfaction. Another successful Life Day delivery was nearly complete. In a few more hours, they could all rest, knowing they had brought joy to billions of children across the galaxy. Tomorrow, the station would begin the long process of recovery and preparation for next year. But tonight, for these precious few hours, they had accomplished something truly magical. He glanced at Leia, who had fallen asleep in her chair despite her earlier determination to see it through to the end. Her small hand still clutched a data pad showing delivery statistics, her face peaceful in sleep. Bale Sr. felt a wave of love for his granddaughter mixed with hope for what she might accomplish someday. She had the compassion and the conviction to do great things. He could see it in her, the same force of will that had driven 17 generations of Organas to maintain this tradition against all logic and reason. The old man looked up at the displays one more time, watching the final zones slowly turn green. Soon, very soon, they would be done. And tomorrow, billions of children would wake to discover gifts they never expected, tokens of love from strangers who cared enough to remember them. Life Day Delivery, Year 2. BBY was proceeding exactly as it should. Perfect precision, successful completion, another year's tradition. Preserved. Nothing could possibly go wrong now. The Life Day Delivery Expansion Section. The Organa family of Alderaan had been the keepers of Life Day for 17 generations, though the story of how they came to hold this sacred trust was itself a tale worth remembering. In the earliest days of the tradition's spread beyond Kashyyyk, Life Day gift-giving had been a local affair, handled by individual communities and families. Parents and relatives would exchange tokens within their households, and charitable organizations would ensure that orphans and disadvantaged children received something to mark the occasion. But as the Republic grew and populations became more dispersed across the stars, as families found themselves separated by light years, and as communities fractured under the pressures of expansion and migration, the tradition began to falter. Children on frontier worlds found themselves forgotten. Families separated by military service or economic necessity couldn't maintain the customs that had once seemed so natural. The beautiful idea that every child should wake on Life Day feeling valued and remembered began to crumble under the practical realities of a galactic civilization. 300 years before the rise of the Empire, a wealthy merchant family on Alderaan decided to do something about this problem. The Organas of that era were not senators or politicians. They were traders and business people who had made their fortune in the hyperspace lane commerce that connected the core worlds. They had resources, connections, and most importantly, a deep well of compassion that had been passed down through their family line like a cherished heirloom. The first Organa to organize systematic Life Day deliveries was a woman named Aurora, after whom the great delivery ship would eventually be named. Aurora Organa had lost her own children to a plague that swept through the core worlds, and in her grief, she had turned her considerable wealth and energy toward ensuring that no child would ever feel forgotten or unloved, even if their own families couldn't be with them. She began modestly, hiring ships to deliver gifts to orphanages across the Alderaan system. Within 5 years, she had expanded the operation to cover the entire Aldera sector. Within 10 years, her network reached across multiple sectors of the core worlds. Aurora Organa innovated many of the techniques that would become standard in Life Day operations. She established information networks to gather data about children's needs and wishes. She created standardized packaging that could withstand the rigors of space travel. She developed routing algorithms that maximized efficiency while minimizing cost. And most importantly, she instilled in her children and grandchildren the philosophy that would guide the operation for centuries. Every child matters, every single one, no exceptions, no excuses. When Aurora died at the age of 93, having personally overseen 47 Life Day deliveries, her son Baron took over the operation. Baron expanded it further, reaching into the mid-rim and establishing the first permanent facility for year-round operations. His daughter Celestia pushed into the outer rim despite the dangers and difficulties of operating in less civilized space. Generation after generation, each Organa who inherited the responsibility of the Life Day delivery took it seriously, expanded it thoughtfully, and passed it on to their children with the same commitment that Aurora had first demonstrated. By the time Bail Organa Sr. took control of the operation 40 years before the Battle of Yavin, the scale had grown to something that would have seemed impossible to Aurora. The Life Day Operations Station hadn't existed in her time. The Aurora's gift, named in her honor, had been built 3 generations after her death and rebuilt and modified so many times since that virtually nothing of its original construction remained. The delivery routes now covered not just the core worlds or even the entire Republic, but reached into imperial space, into independent systems, into corners of the galaxy where Republic authority had never truly extended. Bale Sr. had inherited more than just an operation from his father. He had inherited a legacy of compassion, a tradition of service, and a promise that stretched back through 17 generations of Organas who had all believed the same fundamental truth, that kindness mattered, that every act of generosity rippled outward through the galaxy in ways impossible to fully measure, and that taking care of children was the most important work any civilization could undertake. The Life Day Operations Station itself was a marvel of engineering and logistics that few outside the Organa family and their trusted workers would ever see. Situated in high orbit above Alderaan, the station benefited from the planet's stable position in the core worlds, its relative safety from the constant conflicts that plagued the Outer Rim, and its political protection as the home world of an influential senatorial family. The cloaking shield that kept it hidden from sensors was a masterpiece of technology that had been continuously upgraded over decades, incorporating innovations from military stealth systems, both in spy tech, and even some principles adapted from Jedi techniques for concealing their presence in the Force. The station's layout reflected the evolution of the operation over time. The oldest section, built nearly 2 centuries earlier, housed the administrative offices and the original control center, now used primarily for historical displays and ceremonial functions. Subsequent expansions had added manufacturing facilities where specially designed toys and gifts could be produced, warehouse levels that could store and organize billions of packages, hangar bays that could accommodate the Aurora's gift and hundreds of support vessels, and residential quarters for the permanent staff who lived aboard the station year-round. The manufacturing facilities deserve special attention, for they represented one of the operation's most closely guarded secrets. While many gifts were purchased from craftspeople and companies across the galaxy, a significant portion were custom-made aboard the station itself. Droid assemblers worked around the clock, supervised by master craftspeople who ensured quality and attention to detail. Textile fabricators produced clothing sized perfectly for individual children. 3D molecular printers created specialized items that couldn't be purchased anywhere in the galaxy. This custom manufacturing solved several problems at once. It allowed the operation to create gifts tailored precisely to individual children's needs and wishes. It provided employment for hundreds of skilled workers who lived aboard the station and dedicated their lives to the Life Day mission. And perhaps most importantly, it ensured security. By producing many gifts in-house rather than purchasing them all externally, the Organas limited the number of outsiders who knew the true scale of their operation, reducing the risk of Imperial discovery or interference. The warehouse levels were organized with a precision that would make a military quartermaster weep with envy. Packages were sorted first by sector, then by system, then by planet, then by region, and finally by individual delivery address. Each package had multiple identification markers, a barcode that could be scanned by droids, a color-coded tag that allowed human workers to sort them visually, and an RFID chip that automated tracking systems could monitor throughout the entire delivery process. But beyond the technical markers, each package also had a name. Not just the name of the child who would receive it, but handwritten notes from the workers who had packed it. Little messages of encouragement or hope. For Jenna on Corellia, who wants to be a doctor someday. For Marcus on Ord, Mantel, who loves his mother very much. For Sari on Dantooine, who deserves better than the Empire has given her. These personal touches weren't necessary for the logistics of the operation, but they mattered to the people doing the work. They were reminders that they weren't just moving boxes, they were touching lives. The command center, where Bale Sr. coordinated the actual delivery operations, was the heart of the entire station, a room that pulsed with energy and purpose on Life Day night. The holographic displays that dominated the space weren't just technical readouts. They were carefully designed to provide both detailed data for the coordinators and an inspiring visual representation of the mission's progress for everyone watching. When a delivery zone turned green on the galaxy map, it wasn't just a status indicator changing. It was a visible confirmation that promises were being kept, that children were being remembered, that hope was being maintained. The displays could zoom in to show individual planets, individual cities, even individual homes if necessary. They could overlay multiple data streams, delivery progress, Imperial patrol movements, weather patterns, local celebrations that might affect timing. Advanced predictive algorithms ran constantly in the background, identifying potential problems before they materialized, suggesting route optimizations, and alerting coordinators to any anomalies that might require attention. But for all its technical sophistication, the command center was ultimately about people making decisions. The computers could process data and suggest options, but the final calls always came from organic beings who understood that behind every number on the displays was a real child with real hopes and real feelings. Bale Sr. had resisted numerous suggestions over the years to automate more of the decision-making process. He believed that compassion required conscious choice, that the promise to every child only mattered if real people were actively choosing to keep it, moment by moment, decision by decision. The delivery crews themselves were as diverse as the galaxy they served. Among them were former military pilots who had grown disillusioned with war and wanted to use their skills for something constructive. Smugglers who had decided that moving toys for children was more satisfying than moving contraband for criminals. Merchants who had retired from commerce but weren't ready to stop working entirely. Adventurers who craved the challenge of navigating difficult routes and completing seemingly impossible deliveries. Many crew members had been children who received Life Day gifts themselves, who remembered what it felt like to wake up and discover that someone had remembered them, and who wanted to give that feeling to others. There was Commander Sato, a human from Mikapo, who had grown up in an Imperial-occupied system where celebrating Life Day was officially discouraged. His family had secretly maintained the tradition, and the gift he received at age 7, a set of navigator's tools, had inspired him to become a pilot. Now, he flew delivery routes that brought him back to Mikapo every year, ensuring that children there experienced what he had. There was Captain Syndulla, the Twi'lek woman who had lost her own children in the Clone Wars and had joined the Life Day operation as a way of processing her grief. She specialized in the most difficult deliveries, the ones to war zones and imperial strongholds, pushing herself to the absolute limit, because she knew that the children in those places needed joy more than anyone. Her personal ship, which she had integrated into the delivery fleet, bore scars from near misses with Imperial patrols and hostile forces, each mark a testament to deliveries made despite enormous odds. There was Lieutenant Varn, a quiet Bothan whose entire extended family had been killed by pirates when he was young. He had grown up in an orphanage on Bothawui, where Life Day deliveries had been the only bright spots in years of institutional care. He remembered the old droid who had brought his gifts each year, remembered how that droid had taken a moment to talk with him, to make him feel seen. Now Varn made a point of spending extra time at orphanages during his delivery runs, knowing that sometimes a few words of kindness could matter as much as the gifts themselves. Each crew member had a story, a reason for being part of this impossible mission. And Bale Sr. knew these stories. He made it a point to learn about every person who worked for the operation, to understand their motivations and their struggles, to recognize their contributions and their sacrifices. This personal attention created a culture of family rather than just employment. People didn't work for the Organas. They worked with them as partners in a shared mission that transcended any single individual or family. The Aurora's gift deserved its own lengthy discussion, for it was more than just a ship. It was a symbol, a promise made physical, a testament to what could be accomplished when technology served compassion rather than conquest. The original Aurora's gift had been a modest Corellian freighter purchased by Aurora Organa's grandson, but that ship had been destroyed in a pirate attack 7 generations ago. The current vessel that bore the name had been built from the salvage, incorporating pieces of the original ship as a connection to the founding vision. Over the decades and centuries since then, the ship had been modified and upgraded countless times. Its hyperdrive system was a custom design that blended technologies from a dozen different manufacturers, optimized specifically for the kind of rapid, precise jumping that the Life Day delivery required. Standard hyperdrives were designed for efficiency and long-distance travel, but the Aurora's gift needed to jump in and out of hyperspace thousands of times in a single night, spending just minutes in each location before moving to the next. This put enormous stress on the motivator systems, requiring specialized components and constant maintenance. The ship's stealth capabilities were equally impressive. Multiple layers of sensor dampening technology made it effectively invisible to most detection systems. Electronic countermeasures could spoof Imperial identification protocols. The hull itself was treated with a special coating that absorbed sensor sweeps rather than reflecting them. When the Aurora's gift wanted to disappear, it disappeared, a ghost ship carrying hope through the darkness. The interior of the ship was organized with ruthless efficiency. The bridge crew worked in shifts, with backup personnel always ready to take over if exhaustion or emergency demanded it. The cargo bays were designed for rapid deployment and recovery of the delivery speeders, with automated systems that could launch or retrieve dozens of vehicles in less than a minute. Medical facilities could handle injuries or illness among the crew, Recreation areas provided spaces for brief rest during the long night of deliveries. But perhaps the most important feature of the Aurora's gift was something less tangible. The ship had carried Life Day gifts for so many years, had been touched by so many hands working toward the same purpose, had witnessed so many moments of children receiving unexpected joy, that it seemed to have absorbed some essential quality of hope itself. Crew members would sometimes speak of feeling the ship's encouragement during difficult moments, of sensing that they were part of something larger than themselves, whether this was psychological projection or something more mystical, whether the ship had somehow developed a presence in the Force. Through decades of being associated with acts of pure kindness, no one could say for certain, but everyone who served aboard the Aurora's gift felt it. The delivery speeders deployed from the Aurora's gift were marvels of miniaturization and efficiency. Each speeder was essentially a stripped-down racing vehicle with a cargo compartment designed to be fast, maneuverable, and capable of operating in a wide variety of atmospheric and environmental conditions. They could handle the frozen wastes of Hoth or the burning deserts of Tatooine with equal competence. Their pilots were trained to fly in urban environments, navigate through traffic, avoid detection by security systems, and land in impossibly tight spaces. A typical delivery speeder carried packages for approximately 50 to 70 children, depending on the size and weight of the individual gifts. The speeder's navigation computer had every address pre-programmed, with optimal routes calculated based on geography, local traffic patterns, and timing requirements. But the pilots always maintained manual control, ready to deviate from the planned routes if circumstances demanded it. Automation was useful, but human judgment was irreplaceable. The protocols for handling Imperial complications had been developed through painful experience over years of operating under the Empire's increasingly oppressive rule. When the Republic had governed most of known space, Life Day had been openly celebrated, and the delivery operation had faced minimal interference. But the Empire viewed most traditions with suspicion, seeing them as potential covers for rebel activity or as distractions from loyalty to the Emperor. Life Day celebrations were discouraged in many systems, sometimes banned outright. This meant that delivery crews had to be extremely careful. They flew in stealth mode whenever possible. They avoided Imperial patrol routes when flight plans were known. They had contingency protocols for what to do if detected. Disengage immediately. Do not attempt to outrun or outfight. Preserve the operation even at the cost of failed deliveries. The missed delivery to Luke Lars on Tatooine had been the direct result of following these protocols correctly. An Imperial patrol had appeared unexpectedly, and the delivery pilot had done exactly what training dictated: abort the approach, avoid detection, return to the Aurora's gift. No one had anticipated that the database would record the delivery as complete based on proximity triggers. That particular failure had been a combination of technological glitch and human oversight, the kind of problem that even the most sophisticated operation couldn't entirely eliminate. But it had exposed a deeper question. When following proper protocols resulted in a broken promise to a child, were the protocols themselves flawed? This was a question that Leia's response would force the entire organization to confront. The year-round operations of the station focused on preparation for the single night of actual deliveries. Information gathering was continuous, with trusted contacts on thousands of worlds reporting back on children who needed to be included on the delivery lists. Some contacts were obvious: orphanage directors, community leaders, teachers. Others were less expected: bartenders who overheard conversations about struggling families, mechanics who noticed children hanging around their shops with nowhere else to go, even some sympathetic imperial bureaucrats who quietly passed along information about families affected by the empire's policies. This information was compiled into massive databases that tracked not just names and addresses, but also interests, needs, family situations, special circumstances. The databases were encrypted with military-grade security and stored on isolated systems that couldn't be accessed remotely, protecting the children's information from any potential imperial discovery. Bale Sr. personally reviewed reports of children in especially difficult situations, making notes about what kinds of gifts might bring them the most comfort or hope. The gift selection process itself was part science and part art. Computers could match children's interests to appropriate gifts based on age, location, and available resources. But final decisions often required human judgment. A child who asked for a particular toy might actually need warm clothing more. A child who asked for nothing might need a gift that told them they were special, even if they hadn't asked for recognition. The workers who made these decisions took them seriously, understanding that the right gift could change a child's entire perspective on their place in the galaxy. Quality control was obsessive. Every gift was inspected multiple times before packaging. Toys were tested to ensure they worked properly. Clothing was checked for correct sizing. Books were verified to be age-appropriate and properly bound. Nothing left the station that wasn't perfect, because anything less than perfect would break faith with the children who received it. This attention to detail added significant cost and time to the operation, but it was never questioned. The promise demanded nothing less than the best. The Life Day Operations Station employed thousands of workers year-round, though the number swelled dramatically in the months leading up to delivery night. Some workers were permanent staff who lived aboard the station with their families, creating a community that existed in orbit above Alderaan but remained separate from it. Others were seasonal employees who came for the busy period and returned to their home worlds afterward. And then there were the volunteers, people who donated their time simply because they believed in the mission. Among the permanent staff were some remarkable individuals whose dedication exemplified the spirit of the operation. There was Sarah, a human woman who had started as a package sorter 40 years ago and had risen to become the director of warehouse operations. She could navigate the storage levels blindfolded, and frequently did, training new workers by having them follow her through the darkness, while she described what was in each section purely from memory. There was Cothalis, the Bothan maintenance chief who had kept the Aurora's gift flying despite mechanical problems that would have grounded any other vessel. He claimed to be able to hear when something was wrong with the ship before any diagnostic system detected it, and crew members swore it was true. They said Cothalis and the Aurora's gift had a bond that went beyond normal understanding, that he cared for the ship the way a parent cares for a child. There was Master Way, an elderly Mirialan woman who supervised the custom manufacturing facilities. She had been a celebrated artisan in her younger days, creating pieces for wealthy collectors across the core worlds. But she had given up that lucrative career to work for the Life Day operation because, as she put it, creating beauty for children who need it is more valuable than creating luxury for people who already have everything. These workers and hundreds like them form the true foundation of the operation. Without their expertise, their dedication, and their absolute commitment to the promise, no amount of technology or planning could have succeeded. They were the ones who made it real, who transformed resources and logistics into actual moments of joy for children across the galaxy. As Life Day night approached in the year 2 BBY, all these elements came together as they had for decades before. The packages were sorted and loaded. The routes were planned and uploaded. The crews were briefed and ready. The Aurora's gift sat in the main hangar bay, its engines humming with barely contained power, eager to begin the annual mission. The command center buzzed with pre-launch activity, final checks and confirmations ensuring that everything possible had been done to guarantee success. Bale Sr. stood at his station, as he had for 40 life days before this one, and felt the familiar mixture of excitement and nervousness that never faded no matter how many times he experienced it. Every year brought new challenges, new complications, new opportunities for things to go wrong. But every year they succeeded. Every year the promise was kept, and this year would be no different. Or so he believed in those final hours before launch, when everything still seemed possible and no mistakes had yet been made. Little did he know that this Life Day would become the most important in the operation's history, not because of its scale or efficiency, but because of how it would challenge the very core of what they were trying to accomplish. Sometimes the most important lessons come not from success, but from failure. And sometimes the smallest mistake reveals the biggest truths. The clocks counted down toward launch time. Workers took their positions. Crews boarded the Aurora's gift and its support vessels. And in the command center, young Leia Organa fidgeted with barely contained excitement, ready to watch another impossible mission succeed. The mission would succeed, of course. 3 billion packages would be delivered to 3 billion children. Every zone would turn green on the displays. Every protocol would be followed. Every measure of success would be achieved, except one. And that single exception would change everything. Additional expansion, character, and world building. The droids of the Life Day Operations Station deserved their own recognition, for they were far more than mere machines serving organic masters. They were partners in the mission, each bringing unique capabilities and, in some cases, genuine personality that made them irreplaceable members of the team. GRF-0, or Granfo as everyone called him, was perhaps the most remarkable example. His exact age was a matter of some debate, even among those who had worked alongside him for decades. The droid himself claimed to have been present at the operation's founding, which would make him over 300 years old, though his memory banks showed signs of degradation that made verifying such claims impossible. What was certain was that Granfo had been part of the Life Day delivery for longer than any organic being currently alive. Granfo's chassis was an amalgamation of parts from different eras and manufacturers. His core processor was ancient, possibly dating back to the early Republic period, but it had been upgraded and modified so many times that determining its original specifications was impossible. His manipulator arms came from at least 4 different droid models. His optical sensors had been replaced dozens of times. His voice synthesizer was a custom unit that gave him a distinctive gravelly tone that sounded remarkably like an elderly human male. What made Granfo truly special, however, was his accumulated experience. 300 years, or 200 years, or even 100 years of life-day deliveries. Whatever his true age, Granfo had witnessed more deliveries than any organic being could hope to see in a lifetime. He had seen the operation grow from Aurora Organa's initial modest efforts to the galaxy-spanning enterprise it had become. He had observed the evolution of technology, the changes in galactic politics, the rise and fall of governments, and through it all, the constant need to bring joy to children. This experience made Granfo's opinions valuable, even when they were delivered with his characteristic gruffness. When he declared that a particular approach wouldn't work, he usually had witnessed similar attempts failing in previous decades. When he suggested an alternative solution, it was often based on successful innovations he had seen implemented generations ago and since forgotten by younger workers. His institutional memory was irreplaceable, a living library of life-day operations history. But Granfo was also deeply conservative in his outlook, suspicious of change, resistant to new ideas that diverged from proven methods. He had watched too many improvements fail. Too many innovations create more problems than they solved. This made him sometimes clash with younger workers and newer droids who wanted to try different approaches. The tension between Granfo's wisdom and his stubbornness was an ongoing dynamic within the operation. C-3PO, by contrast, represented the opposite end of the droid spectrum. Where Granfo was ancient and experienced, C-3PO was relatively young, having been assigned to the life-day operation only 5 years before the events of Tau BBY. Where Granfo was confident in his knowledge, C-3PO was anxious and uncertain, constantly worrying about potential failures and complications. Where Granfo trusted in tried and tested methods, C-3PO loved protocols and procedures, finding comfort in detailed instructions and clearly defined roles. C-3PO had been programmed as a protocol droid, designed for etiquette, diplomacy, and translation. The assignment to life-day operations had been something of a surprise to him, and he had initially felt wildly out of place among the logistics specialists and delivery pilots. But Bale Sr. had recognized that a protocol droid's skills were actually perfectly suited to certain aspects of the operation. C-3PO's fluency in over 6 million forms of communication made him invaluable for coordinating with contacts across the galaxy, many of whom spoke languages that no one else on the station understood. His obsessive attention to detail caught errors that might otherwise have slipped through less careful review. His diplomatic programming helped him smooth over conflicts between strong personalities within the crew. What C-3PO lacked in confidence, he made up for in conscientiousness. He approached every task with meticulous care, double and triple checking his work, cross-referencing data, and ensuring that everything was done according to proper procedures. This made him sometimes slow and occasionally annoying to those who preferred to work more quickly. But it also meant that assignments given to C-3PO were completed with absolute thoroughness. The rivalry between C-3PO and Granfo had become legendary within the station. They argued constantly, each convinced that the other represented a fundamentally flawed approach to their shared mission. Granfo thought C-3PO was too timid, too reliant on rules, too unwilling to trust his own judgment. C-3PO thought Granfo was reckless, too dismissive of proper protocols, too confident in outdated methods. Yet despite their constant bickering, they worked together remarkably well when it truly mattered. Their different perspectives complemented each other, creating a balance between caution and boldness, between tradition and adaptation. R2-D2 was the third member of this droid trio and in many ways the most mysterious. Astromech droids were designed to be tools, sophisticated certainly, but fundamentally utilitarian. They lacked the sophisticated personality programming of protocol droids, the complex social algorithms that let droids like C-3PO or Granfo develop distinct characters. Yet R2-D2 had undeniably developed a personality, expressed through his beeps and whistles and through his actions in ways that went far beyond his original programming. R2-D2 had joined the Life Day operation just a year before C-3PO, assigned as a backup systems manager. His official duties involved maintaining the computer networks, troubleshooting technical problems, and ensuring that the vast array of systems that made the operation possible all worked in harmony. But R2-D2 did far more than his job description required. He seemed to have an instinctive understanding of how systems should work, an almost intuitive grasp of optimal configurations and potential problems. Crew members told stories about R2-D2 fixing problems before anyone knew they existed, rerouting power systems in anticipation of surges that hadn't yet occurred, identifying potential failures in equipment that seemed to be functioning perfectly. Some attributed this to sophisticated predictive algorithms in his programming. Others, perhaps more fancifully, wondered if the little droid might have some connection to the Force, some ability to sense the flow of energy and events in ways that transcended mere computation. What was certain was that R2-D2 approached his work with something that could only be described as enthusiasm. He seemed to genuinely enjoy solving problems, to take satisfaction in making systems work better, to find purpose in contributing to the Life Day mission. His cheerful beeps and optimistic chirps were a constant presence throughout the station, a reminder that even droids could find joy in service to something larger than themselves. The relationship between the three droids, Granfo, C-3PO, and R2-D2, formed one of the social cores of the operation. Workers would gather to watch their interactions, finding entertainment and sometimes wisdom in the contrast between Granfo's experience, C-3PO's anxiety, and R2-D2's confident competence. The three droids had become, in their own way, a family, bickering and supporting each other with the complex dynamics that characterized all families, biological or chosen. Beyond the central characters and the main operations, the Life Day Operations Station was home to countless smaller stories, individual lives intersecting with the greater mission in ways both profound and mundane. There was Joe, a young human from Ord Mantell who had joined the operation as a package handler at 16 and had worked his way up to become a delivery pilot by 22. He flew delivery routes to the roughest systems in the Outer Rim, places where Imperial presence was heavy, and local crime syndicates made any operation dangerous. He did it because he had grown up in one of those rough places. and he knew firsthand how much a Life Day gift could mean to a child who had very little else. There was Nala, a Togruta woman who supervised the information networks that gathered data about children across the galaxy. She had lost her entire family in the Clone Wars and had no children of her own, but she poured all the parental love she might have given to biological children into ensuring that the Life Day operation had the best possible information about the children they served. She personally reviewed every report of a child in difficult circumstances, made notes about what kind of gift might help, and followed up afterward, when possible, to see if the delivery had made a difference. There was Tomas, an elderly human who had retired from a successful career as a starship engineer and volunteered his expertise to the operation. He spent his days in the maintenance bays, teaching younger mechanics the tricks and techniques he had learned over a lifetime of keeping the ships flying. He charged nothing for his time, accepting only room and board on the station because, as he put it, "I've made enough money. Now I want to make some meaning." These individuals and hundreds like them created a community aboard the station that functioned almost like a small city. There were families raising children in the residential quarters, couples who had met while working for the operation and fallen in love surrounded by gifts meant for other people's children. There were friendships forged in the intensity of Life Day preparation, bonds created by shared purpose and mutual respect. There were conflicts too, of course, disagreements about methods and priorities, personality clashes, and competing visions of how things should be done. But through it all, the shared commitment to the mission held them together. The residential sections of the station were designed to feel like home rather than like industrial facilities. Living quarters had real windows looking out at space or down at Alderaan, not just view screens showing external cameras. Common areas included parks and gardens, carefully maintained green spaces where children could play and adults could relax. There were schools for the children of workers, libraries, recreational facilities, even a small theater where people staged performances and showed holofilms. This investment in quality of life wasn't just compassion on the part of the Organa family, though that certainly played a role. It was also practical. People who felt at home, who had comfortable lives and strong communities, worked better. They brought enthusiasm and creativity to their tasks rather than just going through the motions. They stayed with the operation for years or decades rather than viewing it as a temporary stop in their careers. The Life Day delivery required total commitment from its workers, and the only way to sustain that commitment over time was to give people lives worth living. The culture that developed aboard the station reflected the mission in subtle ways. Generosity was celebrated, compassion was valued, competition existed, certainly. People are people, and the drive to excel is universal, but it was competition in service of the mission rather than for personal glory. Workers took pride in finding better ways to organize packages, in optimizing delivery routes, in creating gifts that perfectly matched a child's needs. Their victories were measured not in personal advancement, but in children's joy. This culture extended to how the station handled mistakes and failures. In many organizations, errors were punished, creating environments where people hid problems rather than addressing them. The Life Day operation took a different approach. Mistakes were viewed as learning opportunities. When something went wrong, the focus was on understanding why and preventing similar problems in the future, not on assigning blame and punishment. This created an atmosphere where people felt safe admitting when they needed help, where they could raise concerns without fear of retribution, where innovation was encouraged because the cost of trying something new and failing was lower than the cost of never trying at all. Of course, this didn't mean there were no standards or consequences. Workers who consistently failed to meet expectations or who demonstrated a lack of commitment to the mission weren't retained. But the bar was effort and care, not perfection. Someone who tried their absolute best and still made mistakes was valued far more than someone who performed adequately but without genuine investment. This philosophy was particularly evident in how the operation handled the increasingly difficult challenge of operating under imperial rule. The Empire's rise had created enormous complications for the Life Day delivery. Systems that had once been safe and welcoming now hosted garrison forces that viewed any unauthorized activity with suspicion. Planets that had openly celebrated Life Day now did so quietly, if at all, fearing that the Empire would interpret traditional celebrations as cover for rebel activity. The Organas had to make difficult choices about how to respond to these changes. They could have scaled back the operation, limiting deliveries to safe systems and abandoning children in Imperial-controlled territories. That would have been the cautious, sensible approach, but it would have broken faith with the very children who most needed to know they weren't forgotten. Children living under occupation, growing up in systems where freedom was restricted and joy was discouraged, needed Life Day gifts more than children in prosperous core worlds where life was easier. So the operation adapted rather than retreated. Delivery crews received training in stealth techniques and evasion tactics. Routes were planned to minimize exposure to Imperial patrols. Contacts in Imperial systems became even more carefully vetted, ensuring they could be trusted not to betray the operation to authorities. The risk increased, certainly, but the mission demanded it. This commitment to serving children in Imperial space had political implications that extended beyond the Life Day operation itself. Some of the contacts who provided information about children in occupied systems were also involved in early rebel activities, resistance movements that opposed imperial rule. The line between bringing gifts to children and supporting resistance to tyranny was not always clear. Bale Jr., with his political position in the Senate, was acutely aware of these complications and frequently urged his father to be more cautious. But Bale Sr. held firm to the principle that the Life Day delivery was not a political operation. They served children regardless of their parents' political affiliations, regardless of whether a system was loyal to the Empire or harbored rebel sympathies. A child on an Imperial stronghold world deserved a Life Day gift just as much as a child on a rebel sympathetic planet. The moment they started making distinctions based on politics, they would have betrayed the fundamental promise that every child mattered. This neutrality was easier to state as a principle than to maintain in practice. Imperial officials who discovered the operation's activities might not appreciate the distinction between serving all children and supporting rebellion. Rebel sympathizers might question why the Organas were delivering gifts to children of Imperial loyalists. But Bale Sr. navigated these tensions by maintaining absolute consistency. The promise was to children, period, and adult politics could not be allowed to corrupt that promise. As the final hours before Life Day delivery approached in the year 7 BBY, all these elements, the history, the technology, the people, the droids, the culture, the challenges, the commitment, came together in the command center. Bale Sr. stood at his station, Leia by his side, Bale Jr. at his post, the droids ready at their stations, and thousands of workers and crew members throughout the station and aboard the Aurora's gift, all focused on the same goal, in a galaxy increasingly dominated by fear and oppression, where the Empire tightened its grip daily and hope seemed like a luxury few could afford. The Life Day delivery represented something profoundly important. It was resistance through kindness. It was rebellion through compassion. It was a declaration that no matter how dark the times became, there were still people who cared about children, who believed in joy, who would risk everything to keep a promise. The countdown to launch continued. The moment approached when the Aurora's gift would depart on its annual journey across the stars. And on thousands of worlds, 3 billion children slept, unaware that a vast operation was mobilizing to bring them tokens of hope and reminders that they were not forgotten. Everything was ready. The mission was about to begin, and nothing, absolutely nothing, could prepare them for what would happen when they discovered that despite all their planning, all their technology, all their commitment, they had failed one child. Because sometimes the most important lessons come not from success, but from the choices we make when confronted with our failures. The Life Day Delivery, Part 2. The Aurora's gift made its final jump into real space just as the first hints of dawn began touching the eastern edges of the galaxy. The ship emerged from hyperspace above Alderaan, its hull scarred from countless micrometeorite impacts and its engines running hot from a night of unprecedented stress. But it had completed its mission. Every delivery zone glowed green on the holographic displays. Every speeder had returned to its deployment pod. Every crew member was accounted for. In the command center, exhausted workers began to shut down procedures that would transition the station from operational mode back to its year-round maintenance and preparation functions. Bale Sr. stood at his station, his eyes tired but satisfied, reviewing the final delivery reports as they came in. Bale Jr. had already left for his quarters, eager to catch a few hours of sleep before his afternoon Senate briefing. The operation had succeeded, and that was all that mattered to him. Leia had woken from her brief nap just in time to see the Aurora's gift return home. She cheered and clapped as the ship entered the hangar bay, her exhaustion forgotten in the joy of knowing that they'd done it, that every child in the galaxy would wake to their Life Day gift. She tugged on her grandfather's sleeve, her eyes bright. "We did it, Grandpa. Every single child. Can we watch the reaction videos? Some families record their children opening gifts and send them to us. Can we watch some?" Bale Sr. smiled down at his granddaughter. "Tomorrow, little one. Right now, we all need rest. Even old men like me have limits." But even as he said it, he was already accessing the reaction database, unable to resist Leia's enthusiasm. A few minutes wouldn't hurt. They could watch just a couple of videos, see the joy they'd created, then get some well-deserved sleep. The reaction videos were a recent addition to the operation, made possible by the spread of holo recording technology across the galaxy. Families who recorded their children's life day mornings sometimes sent the footage to the organas as a thank you, a way of showing that the gifts had been received and appreciated. It was one of Bale Sr.'s favorite parts of the entire operation. These glimpses of pure happiness, these moments of connection across the vast distances of space. He pulled up a video from Naboo, showing a young human girl discovering a handmade doll wearing traditional Naboo dress. The child's face lit up with pure delight, and she immediately hugged the doll close, spinning around her family's living room with joy. Leia watched with a huge smile pointing at the screen. "Look how happy she is. We did that, Grandpa. We made her that happy." Another video, this one from Corellia. A boy opening a model YT 1300 freighter, the kind that would one day become famous as the Millennium Falcon. His squeal of excitement brought laughter from his parents in the background of the recording. More videos followed. A Twi'lek child on Ryloth receiving a set of musical instruments. A group of younglings at an orphanage on Ord Mantell sharing gifts together. Each video was a reminder of why they did this, why the impossible task was worth every moment of stress and exhaustion. But then came a video that made Bale Sr.'s smile falter. It was from Tatooine, showing a young human boy, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, standing in front of a modest homestead at dawn. The boy was looking around with eager anticipation, checking behind moisture evaporators and in storage alcoves, clearly searching for something he expected to find. But his search came up empty. As the seconds ticked by, the boy's excitement dimmed, his shoulders slumped. He walked back inside, and the recording ended. Bale Sr.'s blood ran cold. That boy had been expecting a life-day gift. That boy had been on their delivery list, but he hadn't received anything. "Grandpa, what's wrong?" Leia had noticed the change in her grandfather's expression immediately. "R2, pull up the delivery logs for Tatooine, Sector Zeta 9. I need to see the completion reports for that region immediately." Bale Sr.'s voice had lost its warmth, replaced by a sharp focus that came from years of dealing with crisis situations. R2-D2 beeped an acknowledgement and began accessing the relevant data. Holographic screens filled with delivery information showing the routes taken, the packages delivered, the confirmations logged. Bale Sr. scanned through the data with practiced eyes, looking for the anomaly he desperately hoped he wouldn't find. There. Grid reference 7492, Lara's homestead, outer rim of the Dune Sea. One package, marked as loaded onto Speeder Delta 7. But the delivery confirmation showed a timestamp that was wrong. The timestamp indicated the package had been delivered, but the time was before the speeder had even deployed from the Aurora's gift. It was an impossible timestamp, which meant it was a database error, which meant, "Oh no." The words came out as barely a whisper, "Oh no, no, no." C-3PO, still active in the command center, hurried over. "Oh my, Master Bale, whatever is the matter? Your vital signs indicate significant stress. Perhaps you should sit down before you suffer a cardiac episode. Pull up the visual logs for Speeder Delta 7, timestamp Sector Zeta 9. Bale Sr.'s hands moved across the holographic interface with urgency. The visual logs showed what actually happened during each delivery run, recorded from the speeder's external cameras for quality assurance and training purposes. The hologram resolved into a view from Speeder Delta Seven's perspective. The pilot was completing deliveries across various homesteads in the Tatooine desert, working systematically through his assigned list. Then came the Lars homestead, the modest collection of moisture farm building sitting alone in the vast sand dunes. The speeder approached, but just as it was about to land, an alert flashed on the pilot's screen. A proximity warning. Something else was in the airspace, something that shouldn't be there. An Imperial patrol speeder appeared on the visual logs, emerging from behind a rock formation. The Life Day delivery speeder immediately aborted its landing approach and climbed rapidly to avoid detection, engaging its stealth systems. Standard protocol when encountering Imperial forces: don't risk exposure of the operation. The pilot had done exactly what he was trained to do, but in the confusion of the near encounter, the delivery package for the Lars homestead had been overlooked. The database had auto-logged it as delivered due to the proximity trigger, but the actual physical package was still sitting in the speeder's cargo hold. When the speeder returned to the Aurora's gift and was decommissioned for the year, that package would have been removed and sent to storage, marked as a delivery error to be corrected next year. Next year, 12 months from now. Far too late for a child who had woken this morning expecting magic and found only empty sand. We missed one. Bale Sr.'s voice was hollow. In 40 years of running this operation, we've never missed a delivery. Never. And now, Leia had been listening, her young face growing increasingly distressed as she understood what had happened. There's a little boy on Tatooine who didn't get his gift. But Grandpa, that's not fair. He was waiting for it. We have to fix this. We can't, sweetheart. The Aurora's gift is powered down for the year. The crews have all gone home. The speeders are in maintenance. We don't have any way to... Then we find a way. Leia's voice had taken on a tone of absolute conviction that surprised even her grandfather. We can't just leave him. That boy's out there right now thinking that he wasn't good enough, that he was forgotten. We have to deliver his gift. C-3PO wrung his hands in distress. Oh dear, oh my, this is unprecedented. In all my years of service, we've never had a missed delivery after completion. The protocols don't cover this situation. What do we do? What do we do? Granfo, who had been powered down in his charging station, suddenly activated and rolled over to join the commotion. What's all this fuss? Can't an old droid get some rest without younglings panicking about, did you say we missed a delivery? The ancient droid's optics focused sharply on Bale Sr. In my 203 life days, we never once missed a child. Are you telling me that under your watch? Not now, Granfo, Bale Sr. snapped, his exhaustion and distress making him shorter than usual. Yes, we missed one. I'm trying to figure out how to fix it. There's nothing to figure out, Leia said, her voice carrying absolute certainty. We get in a ship and we deliver the gift. It's that simple. It's not simple at all, Princess, C-3PO interjected. Tatooine is in Imperial-controlled space. The risk of detection is considerable. And even if we could reach the planet safely, locating one specific homestead in the vast dune sea would require... Oh my, this is complicated. I don't care how complicated it is. Leia crossed her arms, a gesture that made her look remarkably like her father when he was being stubborn. We're the Life Day delivery service. We deliver to every child. That's what we do. So we're going to deliver this gift right now, before that little boy spends another hour thinking he was forgotten. Bale Sr. looked at his granddaughter, seeing the fierce determination in her eyes, the absolute refusal to accept that they had failed a child. Part of him wanted to tell her it was impossible, that sometimes things went wrong and you had to accept it and move on. But a larger part of him, the part that had spent 40 years ensuring that no child was forgotten, knew that Leia was right. They couldn't leave that boy on Tatooine believing he didn't matter. "All right," he said, straightening up with new resolve. "All right, we're going to fix this. C-3PO, is there any ship on the station still operational? Anything that could make the jump to Tatooine?" C-3PO consulted his internal databases. The Aurora's gift requires at least 72 hours of maintenance before it can make another hyperspace jump safely. The delivery speeders lack hyperdrives entirely. However, the droid paused, seeming almost embarrassed. "There is one ship, the old Alderaan cruiser from 8BBY. It's been in Hangar Bay 7 for years, used primarily for storage. Technically functional, but hardly what one would call reliable." "The old girl!" Granfo's optics brightened. "I remember that ship. Built her myself. Well, supervised the construction at least. She's got good bones. A bit outdated, a bit creaky, but she'll fly. Better than any of these modern ships with their fancy computers and their backup systems that fail when you need them most." "She's a death trap," C-3PO countered. "Her hyperdrive is 3 generations obsolete. Her life support systems are barely functional. Her navigation computer still uses punch cards, for heaven's sake. Which means she can't be hacked by Imperial slicers," Granfo shot back. "And she's small enough to slip past most sensor nets. She's perfect for a quick run to Tatooine and back." Leia was already heading for the door. "Then let's go. What are we waiting for?" "Leia, wait!" Bale Sr. called after her, but the young princess was already out the door and running down the corridor. He sighed deeply, feeling the weight of his 70-plus years. "This is insane. I should wake Bale Jr. I should consult with the council. "You should follow your granddaughter," Granfo said, his tone surprisingly gentle, "because she understands something that maybe we all forgot in our precise schedules and perfect efficiency. She understands that every single child matters, not as a number on a display, not as a completion percentage, but as a real person with real feelings who's counting on us." Bale Sr. looked at the ancient droid, then at the holographic display still showing that sad little boy on Tatooine, searching for a gift that hadn't come. He made his decision. R2 pulled a package from storage and bring it to Hangar Bay 7. C-3PO, plot a course to Tatooine that avoids known Imperial patrol routes. Granfo, if that ship is going to fly, I need you to make sure she's ready in 20 minutes. "We're really doing this?" C-3PO's voice climbed an octave. "We're actually going to attempt an unauthorized flight into Imperial space aboard a decades-old ship to deliver a single life-day package?" "Yes," Bale Sr. said firmly. "Yes, we are, because that's what we do. We deliver to every child, no exceptions." Hangar Bay 7 was in the oldest section of the Life Day Operations Station, a cavernous space filled with equipment from previous decades and generations, spare parts, outdated machinery, and in the very back corner, covered with protective tarps and dust, the Alderaan cruiser that Granfo had spoken of. Leia was already there when Bale Sr. arrived, pulling tarps off the ship with determination that made them billow like sails. The ship beneath was, well, vintage was a kind word for it. Ancient was more accurate. It was a Corellian light freighter design from decades past, smaller than the Aurora's gift, but still substantial, with a classic triple-engine configuration and a hull that showed the patina of age. "She's beautiful," Leia breathed, and in the dim lighting of the hangar, with the enthusiasm of a child who saw potential rather than problems, maybe she was. Granfo rolled up beside them, extending various tools from his manipulator arms. "All right, let's get her ready. Leia, start removing the rest of those tarps. Master Bale, check the fuel cells in compartment 7. I'll handle the engine startup sequence." They worked quickly, a strange team, united by a common purpose. Bale Sr. found himself grateful for the distraction of physical work, the simple tasks of preparation that kept his mind from dwelling on the risks of what they were about to attempt. Tatooine was deep in Imperial space. They would be flying an old, unregistered ship without proper clearances. If they were caught, it could expose the entire Life Day operation. But if they didn't go, a child would spend Life Day believing he'd been forgotten. C-3PO arrived carrying the package, a small box wrapped in traditional Life Day paper with the name Luke written on the identification tag. Behind him, R2-D2 rolled in with a data pad showing the navigation plot to Tatooine. "The route I've calculated avoids 4 major Imperial checkpoints and 3 known patrol routes," C-3PO explained. "However, the journey will take approximately 6 hours, as we must use slower hyperspace lanes to avoid detection. There's also a 47% chance of encountering random Imperial patrols, and a 23% chance of mechanical failure based on this ship's age, and if we factor in the possibility of—" "Thank you, 3PO, Bale Sr. interrupted gently. "Your analysis is noted. Now, I need you to come with us. We'll need your translation protocols if we encounter any complications." "Come with you? Me? Oh my, I'm not designed for field operations. I'm a protocol droid. My circuits aren't rated for this level of stress." "Perfect. Then you'll fit right in with the ship," Granfo said, with what might have been droid humor. "Now get aboard before I reprogram your personality matrix to something less annoying." The interior of the old cruiser was a time capsule from a different era of space travel. Manual controls instead of touchscreens, analog readouts instead of holographic displays, seats that were actually comfortable rather than ergonomically optimized. Leia claimed the co-pilot's chair immediately, strapping in with practiced ease despite her young age. Bale Sr. settled into the pilot's chair, his hands moving over controls he hadn't touched in decades. It came back to him, though, the feel of manual flight, the direct connection between pilot and ship that newer vessels with their computer assist systems had lost. There was something almost nostalgic about it, something that reminded him of his own youth when he'd first learned to fly. All systems are, well, functioning might be too strong a word. All systems are present and responding to input, Granfo reported from the engineering station. "We have power, we have life support, we have a hyperdrive that probably won't explode. What more could you ask for?" "Confidence," C-3PO suggested weakly from where he'd wedged himself into a corner near the communication station. R2-D2 beeped from the navigation console, and the display lit up with their course to Tatooine. It was indeed a circuitous route, looping well away from the most direct path to avoid detection, but it would get them there. Bale Sr. activated the comm system. "Command Center, this is, well, I suppose this is Hangar Bay 7. We're departing on an emergency delivery run. Log it as a special circumstances mission." A confused voice crackled back through the old speakers. "Sir? Master Bale? Is that you? We show you aboard the Old Girl. That ship hasn't flown in years. Are you sure?" "I'm sure. We'll be back in approximately 12 hours. Monitor our course and be ready to assist if we run into trouble." He closed the comm channel before anyone could raise further objections. "All right, let's bring joy to a child." The old cruiser lifted from the hangar bay with a groan of protest from systems that hadn't been used in years. But she lifted. She cleared the atmospheric shield, and for a moment they hung in space above Alderaan, the beautiful blue and green world spread out beneath them. Then Bale Sr. engaged the hyperdrive. There was a moment of terrible grinding noise that made C-3PO emit a shriek of alarm. But then the stars stretched into lines and they were away, racing through hyperspace on their impossible mission. The journey through hyperspace was uncomfortable. The old cruiser shook and rattled in ways that modern ships simply didn't. Every few minutes, some alarm would sound, indicating a system operating outside its optimal parameters. Grandpa would investigate, make some adjustment, and the alarm would quiet for a while. "Tell me about the boy," Leia said, breaking the tense silence. "The one we're delivering to. Luke, what's his story?" Bale Sr. pulled up the file on his datapad. "Luke Lars lives with his Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru on a moisture farm in the Dune Sea. Parents deceased, foster child. His uncle is a hard-working farmer, makes enough to keep them fed, but not much more. Luke's gift request was simple, a model starfighter. He wants to be a pilot someday." "Did we get him a good one?" Leia asked. "The best model starfighter we had? We got him an X-Wing model, top of the line, detailed enough to help him learn the systems if he ever does become a pilot." Bale Sr. smiled softly. "Your grandfather on your mother's side helped design the X-Wing, you know. I thought it was appropriate." Leia nodded seriously. "When we deliver it, can I be the one to give it to him, please?" "We'll see. First, we have to get there without being caught by the Empire." But even as he'd said it, Bale Sr. knew he would let her. This was her mission more than his. She was the one who had refused to accept that they could leave a child behind. She deserved to be the one to make the delivery. The hours passed slowly. They dropped out of hyperspace several times to change course and avoid potential Imperial presence. Each re-entry into normal space a moment of breath-holding tension until they confirmed they were alone. The ship held together, though Grandpa spent much of the journey in the engine compartment, coaxing life from systems that, by all rights, should have failed years ago. C-3PO narrated their doom every few minutes. "The port engine is running 15% hot. We're down to backup life support in sectors 3 through 7. The hyperdrive motivator is making a sound that I can only describe as deeply concerning." But despite his constant predictions of imminent destruction, the old cruiser kept flying. R2-D2, for his part, seemed to be enjoying the adventure. The little astromech beeped cheerfully, interfacing with the ship's ancient systems and finding ways to optimize their performance that the original designers probably never imagined. At one point, he managed to increase their hyperspace speed by 2% through some clever rerouting of power systems, earning a grudging compliment even from Granfo. They were 4 hours into the journey when they encountered their first real problem. Dropping out of hyperspace near the Arcana sector to make a course correction, they found themselves much closer to an Imperial Star Destroyer than the navigation computers had predicted. "Oh my stars!" C-3PO shrieked. "We're doomed! They'll detect us! They'll capture us! They'll scrap me for parts!" Bale Sr. immediately killed their engines and activated every stealth system the old ship possessed, which admittedly weren't many. They drifted, running on minimal power, hoping that the Star Destroyer's sensors would overlook one small ancient freighter amid all the cosmic debris of the sector. The massive Imperial warship hung in space like a predator, its triangular hull bristling with weapons. On its bridge, officers would be monitoring sensor displays, looking for any sign of rebel activity or unauthorized vessels. The old cruiser was so outdated that it might not even register as a threat, or it might stand out precisely because of how unusual it was. Seconds stretched into minutes. The Star Destroyer continued its patrol pattern, seemingly oblivious to the small ship drifting in its sensor shadow. Leia gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles white, but she didn't make a sound. Even at 8 years old, she understood the need for absolute quiet. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 10 minutes, the Star Destroyer completed its patrol sweep and jumped to hyperspace. The old cruiser was alone in the sector. Bale Sr. let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was too close. "Shall we return to Alderaan, sir?" C-3PO asked hopefully. "I think we've demonstrated admirable effort. Surely no one could fault us for—" "We're going to Tatooine," Leia said firmly. "We didn't come all this way to turn back now." Bale Sr. looked at his granddaughter and saw himself reflected there, the same stubbornness that had led him to run life-day deliveries for 40 years despite all the logical reasons to stop. "The princess is right. We continue." They jumped back into hyperspace and pressed on. The final approach to Tatooine came as the system's twin suns were setting, painting the desert world in shades of orange and red. Bale Sr. brought the old cruiser in low, skimming the atmosphere to avoid detection by orbital sensors. Imperial presence on Tatooine was lighter than on core worlds, but it still existed. Mos Eisley had a garrison, and there were regular patrols across the more populated areas. But the Dune Sea, where Luke Lars lived, was largely ignored by the Empire. Too remote, too poor, too irrelevant to waste resources patrolling. That isolation had protected Luke's family from Imperial attention. Today, it would also protect the life-day delivery that was running 12 hours late. "There," Leia pointed at the navigation display. "Grid reference 7492. That's the Lars homestead." The display showed a single structure in the vast emptiness of the sand dunes, a partially underground moisture farm that looked tiny against the scale of the desert. Bale Sr. brought the ship down a few kilometers away, not wanting to land directly at the homestead and potentially frighten the family. They sat down in a depression between two dunes, the old cruiser settling onto the sand with a final groan of tired machinery. For a moment, nobody moved. They'd made it. Against all odds, across hundreds of light years, Avoiding Imperial patrols and mechanical failure, they had reached Tatooine. "Grandfo, stay with the ship and keep the engines warm," Bale Sr. said, unstrapping from the pilot's chair. "If we need to leave quickly, I want to be able to lift off immediately. R2, monitor local comm channels for any sign of Imperial activity. C-3PO, you're with Leia and me." "I was afraid you'd say that," the protocol droid muttered, but he followed them to the cargo ramp. The heat of Tatooine hit them like a physical force when the ramp lowered. Even in the evening, the desert retained its warmth, the air dry enough to parch throats within minutes. Bale Sr. grabbed the package, Luke's X-Wing model wrapped in traditional Life Day paper, and together with Leia and C-3PO, they began walking toward the Lars homestead. The sand shifted under their feet, making the journey more difficult than it looked. Leia struggled at first, her shorter legs sinking deeper into the dunes, but she refused to be carried. She walked beside her grandfather with determination, focused on the mission. As they crested the final dune, the Lars homestead came into full view. It was a humble place, built partially underground to escape the worst of the desert heat. Moisture evaporators stood like sentinels around the perimeter, drawing precious water from the air. A few speeders and farming equipment sat in various states of repair near the main entrance. And there, sitting on the edge of the entrance ramp, was a small figure, a boy, probably 6 or 7 years old, with sandy blonde hair and wearing simple farm clothes. He was staring out at the desert, his posture suggesting sadness or disappointment. Luke Lars, the child they had traveled across the galaxy to find. Leia didn't wait for her grandfather's signal. She took the package from Bale Sr.'s hands and marched down the dune toward the homestead, her red and white Life Day delivery uniform bright against the sand. Luke noticed them when they were about 30 meters away. He stood up, shading his eyes against the setting suns, clearly confused about who these strangers might be and why they were approaching his isolated home. Leia waved. "Luke! Luke Lars!" The boy's confusion deepened, but he didn't run. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the hope of a child who still believed in good things despite disappointment. He walked toward them, meeting them halfway between the homestead and the dune. "Who are you?" Luke asked, his voice young and uncertain. Leia held out the package, and her face broke into the widest smile. "We're the Life Day delivery service, and this is for you." Luke stared at the package, then at Leia, then back at the package. "But Life Day was this morning. I checked. There was nothing." "I know," Leia said gently. "We made a mistake. An Imperial patrol scared off our delivery speeder, and your package got left behind by accident. But we couldn't let you spend Life Day thinking you'd been forgotten. So we came, right now, to make sure you got your gift." "You came all the way here just for me?" Luke's voice was filled with wonder. "Every child matters," Leia said, echoing her grandfather's philosophy. "Every single one. Now open it. See what you got." Luke took the package with trembling hands. He carefully unwrapped it, saving the paper as if it were precious, revealing the box beneath. When he opened the box and saw the X-Wing model inside, his face transformed. Pure joy, the kind that only children can express, radiated from him. "An X-Wing, a real X-Wing model. I've wanted one of these forever." He looked up at Leia, his eyes shining. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I thought..." I thought I hadn't been good enough this year. I thought I'd been forgotten. Leia shook her head. You're not forgotten, Luke. You'll never be forgotten. From the homestead, voices called out. An older couple had emerged, clearly Luke's uncle and aunt, alarmed by the presence of strangers. They started hurrying over, concern on their faces. Bale Sr. stepped forward, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. We mean no harm. We're just delivering a Life Day package that was delayed. We'll be leaving now. Owen Lars looked suspicious, his desert-hardened face skeptical of strangers bearing gifts. But Beru Lars saw the joy on Luke's face, saw the precious X-Wing model in his hands, and her expression softened. You're really the Life Day delivery? She asked, wonder in her voice. We thought it was just stories. It's real, Bale Sr. confirmed, and we're very sorry for the delay. It won't happen again. Luke was already examining the X-Wing model with fascination, his fingers tracing over the detailed components, his imagination clearly soaring with thoughts of space battles and heroic flights. For him, the moment of disappointment from this morning was already fading, replaced by the reality of a dream come true. Leia watched him with satisfaction, then turned to her grandfather. We did it, Grandpa. He's happy. Yes, Bale Sr. agreed quietly. Yes, we did. They said their goodbyes quickly. The Lars family needed time to process this unusual visit, and Bale Sr. wanted to be off Tatooine before any Imperial patrols happened by. As they walked back to the ship, Leia looked over her shoulder several times, watching Luke and his new X-Wing model getting smaller in the distance. He's going to do great things someday, she said with unexpected certainty. I can feel it. C-3PO, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during the exchange, finally spoke up. That was actually rather wonderful. I mean, highly irregular and extremely dangerous, but wonderful nonetheless. They reached the old cruiser just as full darkness fell over Tatooine. Granfo had the engines ready, and R2-D2 reported no Imperial activity in the area. Within minutes, they were lifting off, leaving the desert world behind. As they climbed toward orbit and prepared to jump to hyperspace, Bale Sr. allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Yes, they had taken risks. Yes, they had potentially exposed the operation. Yes, by all logical measures, it had been a foolish thing to do. But they had reached a child who needed them. They had turned disappointment into joy. They had lived up to the promise that every child mattered, no exceptions. That was worth any risk. The jump back to Alderaan was uneventful. The old cruiser somehow running better on the return journey than it had on the outbound flight. Maybe the ship knew it was going home. Maybe Granfo's constant adjustments had finally optimized the systems. Or maybe, just maybe, a bit of Life Day magic was looking out for them. They arrived back at the Life Day operations station just before dawn, having completed their impossible mission in less than 12 hours. The old cruiser settled into Hangar Bay 7 with a final shudder, and the engines powered down with what sounded almost like a satisfied sigh. Bale Sr. and Leia emerged from the ship exhausted but triumphant. Bale Jr. was waiting for them in the hangar, and his expression was not happy. Father, Leia, do you have any idea how reckless that was? Flying an unregistered ship into Imperial space, risking exposure of the entire operation? For one child? Bale Sr. met his son's gaze steadily. Yes, for one child, because that one child matters just as much as all the others. Because our promise is to every child, not to every child except the ones who are inconvenient to reach. The operation. The operation is about bringing joy to children, Leia interrupted, her young voice sharp. Not about maintaining perfect statistics, not about playing it safe. It's about making sure nobody feels forgotten. Bale Jr. looked at his daughter, seeing the conviction in her eyes, the absolute certainty that what they had done was right. He saw his father watching him, not with anger, but with something that might have been disappointment that his son didn't understand. For a long moment, the three Organas stood in the hangar, representing three different philosophies about what the Life Day delivery truly meant. Finally, Bale Jr. sighed. "You're both impossible. You know that." "Yes," Bale Sr. agreed with a slight smile. "It's a family trait." "What you did was dangerous and irresponsible," Bale Jr. continued, but his tone had softened. "It was also brave and kind, and exactly what Mother would have done." That acknowledgement meant more than any grand speech. Bale Jr. helped them from the hangar bay back to the residential sections of the station, listening as Leia told him every detail of their adventure, her words tumbling over each other in her excitement. In his charging station, Granfo settled in with a satisfied hum. "Best Life Day in 204 years, he muttered to himself before powering down. C-3PO staggered to his own charging port, still muttering about stress levels and protocol violations, but there was something in his photoreceptors that might have been pride. R2-D2 beeped a cheerful good night and rolled off to his maintenance bay. And in the command center, now quiet after the chaos of the delivery night and the unexpected mission, the holographic display showed the galaxy map. Every delivery zone glowed green. Every child had received their gift, including one small boy on Tatooine who would grow up to destroy the Death Star and help restore freedom to the galaxy. But that's a different story for a different time. Tonight, Luke Lars was just a child who learned that the universe hadn't forgotten him, that sometimes people will go to impossible lengths to keep their promises. That hope and kindness still existed, even in the darkest times, and far above Alderaan, the Life Day Operations Station dimmed its lights and began its rest cycle, having completed another successful year. The tradition would continue. The promise would be kept. Every child mattered, every single one, no exceptions. The Life Day Delivery. Part 3. The days following the emergency delivery to Tatooine brought unexpected consequences that rippled through the Life Day Operations Station like waves across water. Word of what Bale Sr. and young Leia had done spread quickly among the workers and delivery crews. Some viewed it as heroic, a demonstration of the true spirit of the operation. Others saw it as reckless, an unnecessary risk that could have compromised everything they had built over generations. Bale Jr. found himself caught between these competing viewpoints, trying to balance his natural caution with his growing understanding that perhaps his father and daughter had grasped something essential that he had missed in all his focus on efficiency and safety. 3 days after their return, Bale Sr. called a meeting in the main conference room. It wasn't the Grand Command Center where the delivery operations took place, but a smaller, more intimate space where serious discussions happened away from the constant hum of machinery and the glow of holographic displays. He had invited the senior staff the crew leaders, and anyone else who wanted to attend. The room was packed. Leia sat beside her grandfather, still wearing her delivery crew uniform, which she had refused to take off since their adventure. Bale Jr. stood near the door, his senatorial robes traded for simple working clothes, his expression guarded. C-3PO and R2-D2 were present, as was Granfo, who had positioned himself prominently in the front row. Bale Sr. stood at the head of the table, his hands folded in front of him, and waited for the room to quiet. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of his years, but also a clarity of purpose that commanded attention. "I want to talk about what happened," he began, "not to defend it, not to justify it, but to understand what it means for us going forward. For 40 years, I have run this operation with one goal: deliver to every child in the galaxy. We've achieved remarkable success. Our efficiency ratings are higher than ever. Our coverage has expanded to billions of children across thousands of worlds. By every measurable metric, we are doing better than any previous generation." He paused, looking around the room at the faces watching him. "But 3 days ago, we failed. We missed one child, one delivery. In 40 years of perfect records, we made our first mistake." Murmurs rippled through the assembled workers. Some nodded in agreement. Others shifted uncomfortably. "The standard procedure for a missed delivery is to log it, investigate what went wrong, implement corrective measures, and ensure it doesn't happen again next year. That's what the protocols say. That's what logic dictates." Bale Sr.'s voice grew stronger. "And that's exactly what I almost did. I almost accepted that we had failed one child and moved on, consoling myself with the knowledge that we had succeeded with billions of others." He looked at Leia, and his expression softened. "My granddaughter wouldn't accept that. She saw something I had forgotten in all my focus on the big picture. She saw that behind the statistics and the success rates and the completion percentages, there was a real child, a real person who woke up on Life Day morning expecting magic and found only disappointment. And she refused to let that stand." Leia fidgeted slightly under the attention of the room, but didn't look away. "So we flew an unregistered ship into Imperial space," Bale Sr. continued. "We risked exposure of the entire operation. We broke a dozen safety protocols and probably violated several laws, all to deliver a single package to a single child on a desert world that most people have never heard of and will never visit." He paused again, and when he spoke next, his voice was thick with emotion. "And it was the most important delivery I've made in 40 years. The room erupted in discussion, voices rising in agreement and disagreement. Bale Sr. let it go on for a moment, then raised his hand for silence. "I know some of you think what we did was reckless. You're right. I know some of you think it was an unacceptable risk to the operation. You're probably right about that too. But I want you to understand something that I'm only now truly grasping myself. This operation isn't really about the logistics. It's not about the efficiency or the technology or even the scale of what we accomplish. It's about the promise." He gestured to the walls around them, where images from past life days hung, photographs of children opening gifts, of families celebrating together, of pure joy captured in frozen moments. "The promise is simple. Every child matters. Not every child we can conveniently reach. Not every child who fits neatly into our delivery routes. every child, period. And the moment we accept that some children don't matter enough to take risks for, we break that promise. We become just another logistics operation, moving packages from point A to point B, optimizing numbers instead of touching lives. The room had grown very quiet. Even those who had been most critical of the unauthorized flight were listening intently. What Leia understood, Bale Sr. said, his hand resting gently on his granddaughter's shoulder, is that our promise only means something if we keep it when it's hard. Anyone can deliver to the easy children, the ones in safe systems with clear routes and no complications. But that child on Tatooine, living in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by Imperial patrols with sand dunes and heat and isolation, he needed us more than most. And if we had failed him, if we had decided he wasn't worth the risk, then what would our promise mean to all the other children in difficult circumstances? What would it mean to the kids on Hoth, or in the unknown regions, or anywhere else where reaching them requires extraordinary effort? A crew leader named Syndulla, a Twi'lek woman who had been flying delivery speeders for 15 years, stood up. You're right. We got into this because we believed every child mattered. Somewhere along the way, I think some of us forgot that. We got focused on the job, on doing it efficiently and safely, and we lost sight of why the job exists in the first place. Others began to stand, adding their voices. A human engineer spoke about remembering his own childhood on a remote mining colony, how a life-day gift had been the only bright spot in years of hardship. A Bothan pilot talked about the first time she saw a child's face light up upon receiving a gift she had delivered, how that moment had given her purpose. Bale Jr. listened to it all, his arms crossed, his expression thoughtful. When the others had finished speaking, he stepped forward. I need to say something. His voice cut through the conversations and the room turned to him. I've never fully embraced this operation. I think everyone here knows that. I've always seen it as a duty, something I did because it was expected of me, not because I believed in it the way my father does. He looked at Bale Sr. When you and Leia flew to Tatooine, my first reaction was anger. You risked everything we had built, everything that generations of Organas had preserved, for one child, one gift, and I thought you were foolish. I thought you were letting emotion override logic. Leia's expression had grown defensive, but Bale Jr. held up a hand. I was wrong. I've been wrong for years. This operation isn't about maintaining a tradition or managing a logistics network. It's about maintaining hope. It's about telling children across the galaxy that they matter, that someone cares, that they're not alone. And if we can't keep that promise when it's hard, then the promise means nothing. He turned to face the assembled workers. I owe my father and my daughter an apology, and I owe all of you a promise. When it's my turn to run this operation, I will honor what it truly means, not just the efficiency and the scale, but the heart of it, the promise that every child matters. Bale Sr. walked over to his son and embraced him. For a moment, 3 generations of Organas stood together, grandfather, son, and granddaughter, united in their understanding of what the Life Day delivery truly represented. The meeting concluded with a resolution. The protocols would be updated. From now on, if a missed delivery was discovered, immediate action would be taken to correct it. regardless of the difficulty or risk involved. The promise to every child would be absolute, with no exceptions and no acceptable reasons for failure. But beyond the practical changes, something more fundamental had shifted. The workers and crews had been reminded of why they did this impossible job. They weren't just moving packages, they were maintaining hope in a galaxy that desperately needed it. In the weeks that followed, the story of the Tatooine delivery spread beyond the Life Day operation station. It moved through underground networks of people who still celebrated the old traditions despite Imperial discouragement. It reached families on remote worlds and in hidden communities, reinforcing their faith that the Life Day delivery was real, that the promise was genuine, and in the most unexpected places, it inspired others to take action. On Lothal, a group of smugglers who had heard the story decided to organize their own small delivery network, bringing supplies to families affected by Imperial occupation. On Mandalore, resistance fighters adopted the philosophy that every person mattered, refusing to leave anyone behind in their operations. On dozens of worlds, the simple act of two people flying across the galaxy to keep a promise to one child sparked movements of kindness and resistance against the growing darkness of the Empire. Leia, for her part, became something of a legend among the delivery crews, the young princess who had refused to accept failure, who had demanded they keep their promise no matter the cost. The crews began referring to difficult deliveries as Leia missions, a term of respect for deliveries that required extraordinary effort or courage. As the year progressed and the Life Day operations station began its preparations for the next delivery season, changes were evident throughout the facility. The culture had shifted. Workers approached their tasks with renewed purpose. Discussions about route optimization now included conversations about children they would be reaching. The focus remained on efficiency, but never at the expense of a promise. Bale Sr. watched these changes with satisfaction. He was getting older, and he knew that within a few years, he would need to step down and let Bale Jr. take over their operation completely. But now, for the first time, he felt confident that his son truly understood what he would be inheriting. Not just a logistics operation, but a sacred trust. Leia, meanwhile, had become even more involved in the Life Day preparations. She spent hours in the warehouses, helping sort packages and learning the names of children they would be delivering to. She studied the delivery routes, memorizing the difficult ones and asking questions about how they could be improved. And she made it known that when she was old enough, she intended to join a delivery crew herself. "You know," Bale Sr. said to her one evening as they reviewed delivery data together, "you're going to do great things, Leia, maybe greater than Life Day deliveries." "Nothing's greater than Life Day deliveries," Leia replied with absolute certainty. "What could be more important than making sure children know they matter?" The old man smiled. "You'll find out someday. But whatever you do, whatever path you choose, I want you to remember what we learned on Tatooine. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is keep a promise to one person, even if the whole galaxy thinks it's impossible or foolish. Sometimes changing one life is more valuable than any grand gesture." "I'll remember," Leia promised, and she would. Years later, when she was leading the rebellion against the Empire, when she was making impossible decisions about risking everything for small chances of success, she would think back to that night when they flew to Tatooine for one child. She would remember that every person mattered, that no one should be left behind, that keeping promises in the face of impossible odds was what separated hope from despair. But that future was still years away. For now, she was simply a young princess learning the true meaning of service, of sacrifice, of caring deeply about others even when it cost you something. The Life Day season approached again. Preparations intensified. The Aurora's gift underwent its annual maintenance, its systems checked and rechecked. The delivery crews trained on new routes and reviewed old ones. The warehouses filled with millions of packages, each one representing a child somewhere in the galaxy who would wake on Life Day morning hoping for magic. And in Hangar Bay 7, the old cruiser that had carried them to Tatooine sat under its tarps once more, returned to storage. But now, instead of being forgotten, it was maintained and ready. Because the new protocol said that if another emergency delivery was needed, they would be prepared. No more scrambling to make an old ship flight-worthy. No more unnecessary risks. They would keep the promise, but they would keep it smartly. The night before the new Life Day delivery, Bale Sr. gathered his family in the command center. Bale Jr. was there, more engaged this year than he had ever been before. Leia practically bounced with excitement, ready for another night of watching deliveries and tracking the progress of her favorite crews. C-3PO and R2-D2 had been given positions of greater responsibility this year, coordinating directly with Captain Merrick on the Aurora's gift. Granfo supervised the younger droids with his usual gruffness, but there was a pride in his voice when he talked about how the operation had evolved. 17,400,000,000 packages this year, Bale Sr. announced, reviewing the final numbers. Our largest delivery ever. We've expanded coverage to include 3 new sectors in the Outer Rim and 2 previously unreachable systems in the unknown regions. Every crew member is trained on the new emergency protocols. Every speeder has backup systems. Every child is accounted for. He paused, looking around at his family and the assembled workers. But more than the numbers, more than the expansion, I'm proud of why we're doing this. Not because it's tradition, not because it's expected, but because we genuinely believe that every single child in this galaxy deserves to know they matter. And we're willing to prove it, one delivery at a time. The Aurora's gift launched right on schedule, its departure watched by thousands of workers who had helped make this moment possible. The ship disappeared into hyperspace, beginning its impossible journey across the galaxy. In the command center, holographic displays came alive with tracking data. Zones began to turn green as deliveries were completed. The familiar rhythm of Life Day night settled over the station, the organized chaos that somehow always resulted in success. But this year, there was something different, a sense not just of duty being fulfilled, but of purpose being lived. Every package wasn't just a completion percentage, it was a promise kept. Every child reached was a confirmation that they mattered, that they were seen, that they were valued. Hours passed. The Aurora's gift jumped from sector to sector, its crews deploying and recovering with practiced precision. Problems arose, they always did, but the team handled them with skill and determination, born from understanding what was at stake. A delivery speeder had engine trouble in the Hoth system. Another speeder diverted to cover the missed deliveries while the damaged ship returned for repairs. 0 children missed. An Imperial patrol appeared unexpectedly in the Ryloth sector. The Aurora's gift adjusted its course, taking a longer route to avoid detection. The delay was made up by optimizing deliveries in the next sector. 0 children missed. A communication glitch caused confusion about which packages should be loaded for the Kashyyyk run. R2-D2 quickly cross-referenced the data and corrected the error before any deliveries were affected. 0 children missed. Every challenge was met with the understanding that failure was not acceptable, not because of pride or perfectionism, but because every failure meant a child who would wake up feeling forgotten, and that was something none of them could accept. Leia watched it all from her station beside her grandfather, calling out successes and cheering for her favorite crews. Bail Jr. monitored the systems with the same careful attention as always, but now there was warmth in his focus, an understanding that the numbers represented real lives, real moments of joy being created across the galaxy. As dawn approached across the core worlds and the final deliveries were being completed in the most remote sectors, Bail Sr. allowed himself to relax slightly. Another successful life day, another year of promises kept, another generation of children would wake to discover that someone, somewhere, cared enough to remember them. The Aurora's gift made its final jump back to Alderaan just as the twin suns began to rise over the planet's eastern hemisphere. The ship entered the hangar bay to a standing ovation from the assembled workers. Captain Merrick and his crew emerged exhausted but triumphant, having completed the most ambitious delivery in the operation's history. 0 children missed. Perfect completion. Promise kept. The celebration in the command center was subdued by exhaustion, but genuine in its joy. Workers embraced each other. Crews shared stories of successful deliveries and close calls. Droids beeped and whirred in what might have been electronic contentment. Bail Sr. stood at the center of it all, his granddaughter's hand in his, watching his life's work validated once again. But this year, it felt different. This year, it felt like more than just maintaining a tradition. It felt like they had reclaimed the soul of what they were doing. In the days that followed, the reaction videos began to arrive. Thousands of them from worlds across the galaxy. Children opening gifts with wonder and joy. Families celebrating together. Moments of pure happiness captured and shared with the people who had made them possible. And among those videos was one from Tatooine. Luke Lars, now 7 years old, had apparently spent the entire year playing with his X-Wing model, learning its systems, dreaming of one day flying a real starfighter. His life day gift this year was a set of pilot training manuals, age-appropriate but still detailed enough to begin teaching him the fundamentals of flight. The video showed him opening the package with the same joy as the previous year, his face lighting up as he realized he was one step closer to his dream. He remembered, Owen Lars said in the background of the recording, his voice filled with wonder. The Life Day delivery actually remembered what he wanted. They care enough to remember. Leia watched the video 3 times, each time with a smile that seemed to light up the room. See, Grandpa? That's why we do this. Right where? That's why it all matters. Yes, sweetheart, Bail Sr. agreed. That's exactly why. As the new year began, and the Life Day Operations Station settled back into its routine of preparation for the next delivery, the lessons of the Tatooine run remained fresh in everyone's minds. Protocols were updated, training was enhanced, but more than any technical change, there was a renewed commitment to the promise: every child matters, no exceptions, no excuses. And if keeping that promise required flying across the galaxy, facing Imperial patrols, or taking risks that seemed impossible, then that's what they would do. Because some promises are worth any price. Bale Sr. knew his time. Running the operation was coming to an end. His health was still good, but he was approaching 80, and the demands of Life Day delivery required energy he knew he wouldn't have forever. Within a few years, Bale Jr. would take over completely. But now, for the first time, that transition didn't worry him. His son understood, Leia understood, the crews understood. The promise would be kept, generation after generation, as long as there were Organas willing to dedicate themselves to bringing joy to children across the galaxy. And in the distant future, when the Empire fell and a new republic rose from its ashes, the Life Day tradition would continue. The Aurora's gift would still fly, though under new management with new crews, adapted to new times. But the core promise would remain unchanged. Every child matters. Luke Lars would grow up to be the hero who destroyed the Death Star, who helped restore freedom to the galaxy, who became a Jedi Master and trained a new generation in the ways of the Force. But he would always remember those Life Day mornings, waking to find gifts that told him someone cared, someone remembered, someone believed he was worth the effort. And Leia, who had refused to accept that even one child could be forgotten, would grow up to be a senator, a general, a leader of the rebellion, and one of the most important figures in galactic history. She would make impossible decisions, take terrible risks, and refuse to accept failure when lives hung in the balance. And at her core would always be the lesson she learned on that night when she and her grandfather flew to Tatooine for one child. Some promises are worth keeping, no matter the cost. Some people are worth fighting for, even if the whole galaxy thinks it's impossible. Every single person matters, not because they're important to the grand scheme of history, not because they'll grow up to be heroes or leaders or change the world, but simply because they're people with hopes and dreams and hearts that can be broken or filled with joy. As the years passed and the Life Day Operations Station continued its work, the story of the Tatooine delivery became legend. New workers heard it during their training. Crews told it to each other during the long night hours in the delivery season. Children who grew up to join the operation remembered hearing about it and being inspired by it. It was the story of what happened when efficiency and heart came into conflict, and heart won. When the safe choice and the right choice diverged, and the right choice was taken. When one child, one promise, one moment of keeping faith mattered more than any statistical measure of success. The galaxy would change. Empires would rise and fall. Wars would be fought and won and lost. But through it all, the Life Day delivery would continue, maintained by people who understood that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to let anyone be forgotten. Every child matters. These 3 words weren't just a slogan or a mission statement. They were a declaration of resistance against a universe that tried to reduce people to numbers, to statistics, to acceptable losses. They were a commitment to see every individual as precious, as deserving of care and attention and effort. And in a galaxy increasingly dominated by those who saw beings as resources or obstacles or expendable assets, that commitment was more radical than any political movement, more powerful than any weapon, more important than any victory in battle, because at the end of the day, civilizations aren't measured by their military might or their economic power or their territorial control. They're measured by how they treat the most vulnerable among them, how they keep promises to those who can't enforce them, how they maintain hope in the face of despair. The Life Day delivery was more than a tradition. It was a testament to the best of what people could be, a reminder that kindness still existed, that generosity still mattered, that someone, somewhere, cared enough to make impossible things happen for no reason other than it was the right thing to do. As long as the Aurora's gift flew, as long as delivery crews pushed themselves beyond reasonable limits to reach one more child, as long as young people like Leia refused to accept that anyone could be left behind, there was hope. And hope, in the end, was the greatest gift anyone could give. So if you've enjoyed this story of the Life Day delivery, if you've been inspired by the promise that every child matters, I encourage you to carry that spirit forward in your own life. Maybe you can't fly across the galaxy to deliver gifts to billions of children, but you can remember the person everyone else forgets. You can make the effort everyone else thinks is too much. You can keep the promise everyone else thinks is impossible. Every person matters. Every single one, including you. If you enjoyed this journey through the Life Day tradition and want to hear more stories from the Star Wars galaxy, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There are countless more tales to explore, from the depths of Sith history to the heights of Jedi philosophy, from the Clone Wars to the rise of the Empire, from forgotten legends to the heroes who shaped galactic destiny. Hit that subscribe button to join our community of Star Wars enthusiasts who appreciate deep dives into the lore, comprehensive explorations of characters and events and stories